Our whole country was marinated in these biblical principles. Today, even though we're Christians, we're marinated in the principles of the world. I mean, think about, just go into your own brain and think about how you think about things. You don't think probably biblically, automatically, the way that those people did in 1776, because we're marinated in, TV and what we learned in school and all these other things. And so we're Christians marinated in a secular world, whereas the secularists in 1776 were marinated in a Bible world. So that's a big, big, big distinction when we talk about the founders. But other than that, the founders were pretty much like we are. There were the right-wingers, there were the left-wingers, and there were the moderates. And a lot of them hated each other. I mean, they really did. They worked together, but the right-wingers hated the left-wingers, and they called each other extremists and hermaphrodites. And I mean, some of the things that you read about these people were just really, really interesting. But at the same time, they were Christians. Oh, and they caned each other in Congress too. I mean, if we think Congress is bad now, there were canings in Congress over the years. So we're not in anything here, not in any place here that we haven't been before. But these people realized what they were doing. There's this famous quote by Benjamin Franklin where he was coming out of Convention Hall and a woman approached him to ask whether the delegates had formed a republic or a monarchy. And he said, "A republican, madam, if you can keep it." Well, we are trying to keep it. And it is very close to going over the cliff. And that's why people like you are just so urgently needed, and we do so much need to pray for our country. Consider what John Adams said. He was one of the right-wingers of the Founding Fathers. But he gave us a warning, and he cautioned his own countrymen in his time, and we have the same caution. He said, and by the way, all the quotes that I'm giving you from the founders are all in the book that I hope we'll get here, and everything is footnoted from David Barton's little library down in Texas. I mean, we don't use any quotes, we don't say anything in the book that is not footnoted, because we don't want to just be talking out of our hat. We want, these are actual facts, and we want people to know that they're actual facts. So John Adams once cautioned his countrymen, "A constitution of government once changed from freedom can never be restored. Liberty once lost is lost forever." That's what John Adams told his contemporaries at the time. And we are definitely on the verge of losing that liberty and that freedom, and we need to be very careful that we grab this country back from the cliff now, because this may be the last opportunity to do it. Another thing John Adams said, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion." I'll say that again. "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." And I think that's exactly what we're finding out now. As we're becoming less of a moral and religious people, we're becoming harder to govern. And why is that? Well, it's because, as George Washington said in his second inaugural address, he said there was a three-legged stool that the nation had to sit upon: religion, morality, and education. And George Washington said, we cannot have morality without religion, and I think we're finding that out today. And he believed that morality was very important in government, and so he really propounded all of that. But our Constitution really is wholly inadequate to any people other than a moral and religious people, because if we govern ourselves, we need fewer laws. If some of you are as old as I am, and a few of you kind of look like you might be, not many, and I'm not pointing fingers, but you know who you are. If there was a time when you could shake somebody's hand and make a deal, and you knew that that deal would never be broken, because people had that much morality, and they believed in God, and they believed that if they did things wrong, that God was going to get them. I mean, they actually believed that maybe they'd go to hell if they did bad things. Now it's like, well, what do you mean you're not doing bad things? What's wrong with you? You're not having any fun. So, but there was a time when a man's word was his bond, And the more that we govern ourselves, the less laws that we need. The more that Wall Street does whatever they do and, you know, screws their customers basically, and the more regulations we need for them. The more the mortgage industry messes up the housing market, the more regulations we need. But if people actually keep their word and do what they're supposed to do, we don't need so many laws. So the first thing we have to have is self-government, and the only way that we can get self-government is through religion and morality and education, just like George Washington said. And we need to get back to that, and you guys are getting back to that. You're educating yourselves and you know, in the founders, and I mean, I just pray that this is going to work. So, our three types of founders, our left-wingers, our right-wingers, and our moderates. I'm going to introduce you to a few of them, just a little bit, and hopefully Glenn Beck and his Founders Fridays will do the same thing. Sam Adams was the most right-wing of the right-wing radicals of the revolution, and he was really the start of it all. Sam Adams was the one who started the committees of correspondence, and they were kind of the email of the time. Up and down the 13 colonies, they were trading letters about what was going on, what are the British doing in your state, you know, and honestly, that's kind of how the Tea Party is. I mean, the Tea Party is like the committees of correspondence, because we're getting together with people from other states, we're realizing there's other people out there who think like we do. And Sam Adams was looking for other people who wanted to, even at that time, he was trying to get the country back to God from the Pilgrims. He was called the last Pilgrim, because he thought that the country was going to hell in a handcart because there weren't pilgrims anymore. So, I mean, I can't even imagine, you know, what he would think if he came back now and saw his name on the beer cans. And, you know, I mean, I think he might be a little upset about it. So he was the one who started the committees of correspondence, and he did all that, and of course he was the one who started he was the one who was heading up the first Tea Party, and when they threw the tea in the Boston Harbor, I mean, that was his gig. So Sam Adams was one of he was John Adams' cousin, and he was definitely a right-wing religious person. I mean, people thought he was an idiot. Seriously, it's kind of like they think about us, you know. I mean, anybody who's going to be throwing tea in the harbor and, you know, doing all the things. Sam Adams was so committed to his country that when he went to the convention in Philadelphia, his friends had to buy him a suit because the man had no business acumen at all, and he was always poor and didn't have two, you know, nickels to rub together. And so his friends would, you know, buy him clothes so he could go to the convention. I mean, he was, you know, he was definitely of the right-wing type. John Adams was also one of the right-wingers. I read some of his quotes to you. He definitely saw all this as a move of God, and he and his wife Abigail wrote back and forth to each other many things about religion. James Madison, who wrote the first 10 amendments and was Thomas Jefferson's right-hand man, was another religious fanatic right-winger. And the first time he ran for office, you know what people told him? They said, you shouldn't be a politician, James. You need to be a pastor. You're too religious. So this was James Madison. And we'll hear a little bit more from him later too, but these were probably the three that I would say would be on the right wing. Interesting thing about Sam Adams, though, there was a time during the Constitutional Convention when it almost fell apart, and they decided that they needed to have prayer. And so Sam Adams, they brought in an Anglican guy, you know, Church of England guy. Well, here's Sam Adams, who's the last pilgrim, and it was like, you know, having an atheist and a Baptist, you know. So what Sam Adams said, though, was, I can hear the prayer of any man who's a patriot and who loves his country. And the ACLU now attacking prayers at city council meetings and all that, I mean, and the way that Sam Adams started that statement was, he said, I am no bigot. I can hear the prayers of any man who's a patriot and who loves his country. And I write letters to city councils all over the country and call the ACLU the bigots all the time, because obviously they can't hear the prayers of people that they don't agree with. And Sam Adams could, and he was the right-winger. So I think us right-wingers are a whole lot more open-minded about those kinds of things than the other side. Okay, so who were the deists or the left-wingers?